Welcome back to the Young Turks. Anna Kasparian and John Iadarola with you. Joining us now is Senator Bernie Sanders to talk to us a little bit about the coronavirus negotiations taking place right now. Senator Sanders, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
I want to start off by, before we get into the nitty gritty of how these negotiations are taking place, I think it's important to share some sobering statistics with our audience regarding how much this pandemic has exacerbated inequality in America. A recent study found that America's 651 billionaires have gained so much wealth during the coronavirus pandemic that they could fully pay for one-time $3,000 stimulus checks for every person in the United States and still be better off than they were before the crisis. The collective net worth of US billionaires now sits just above $4 trillion, nearly double the combined wealth owned by the bottom 50% of the American population. I see that it's pretty clear that inequality was a problem in the country prior to this pandemic, and now we're seeing a lack of real financial relief for the American people because of this inability for congressional lawmakers to make a deal. Can you tell us why that is? The defense bill was incredibly easy to pass in the House. It's likely to pass in the Senate with a veto-proof vote.
When we talk about spending on the defense department, more money than the next 10 nations combined, $740 billion, as you just indicated, bipartisan support, not a problem. We don't even talk about it. Tax breaks for billionaires a couple of years ago, $1 trillion, not a problem. Massive amounts of corporate welfare to the fossil fuel industry. What is the problem? Just that they're destroying the planet, so what? Give them hundreds of billions of dollars. But when it comes to a moment in American history where the working families of America today are in worse economic distress than any time since the Great Depression, hunger soaring, tens of millions of people facing eviction, half of our people living paycheck to paycheck. Suddenly we're very worried, Anna, about money. For Wall Street, not a problem. Defense Department, not a problem. For the children of America and working class people, a major problem. So here is what's going on, and I want everybody to hear this. All of you will recall that it wasn't so many months ago where the Democrats were fighting for several $1 trillion, okay, in benefits to workers, to hospitals, the states, the cities, you name it, a good bill. Right now, we are down to 350 billion in new money, 550 billion to be carried over from the CARES Act, all of $900 billion. This proposal does not include one nickel for direct payment to workers in terms of what we had in the CARES Act, which was $1,200 for an adult, $500 for a kid, and only $300 in supplementary unemployment benefits. This is a weak bill, a fraction of what the Democrats had originally fought for. So I'm gonna do everything that I can to make sure that Congress does not leave for its Christmas vacation until we take care of the needs of working families.
Senator, one thing that has been sometimes in the deal, sometimes apparently not in the deal. Yesterday, Mitch McConnell said that the corporate liability shield wouldn't necessarily need to be in there, but today it seems like it's back on the table. Is that the sort of thing that will be or should be a deal breaker, either for you or for other Democrats in terms of supporting this final bill?
One of the things. The direct payment is also for me a deal breaker. This is a total outrage. You have had major corporate interest, often in the food processing business, the meat processing business, who have treated their workers in the most irresponsible manner, where hundreds of workers have become ill, some have died. You have seen in Amazon some 20,000 workers who have been infected. We don't know how many have died. If you give them a green light, and if you say, no problem, you don't have to take any responsibility for your treatment of workers and the safety provisions or lack of safety provisions that you have provided. What you're saying to every corporate interest in America, you can do anything you want, and there is impunity. And that is an outrage which must not be allowed to happen.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that. I mean, just looking at what happened to employees at the Tyson meatpacking plant and how Tyson is now facing, I think, a very justified wrongful death lawsuit, that really hangs in the balance based on the next stimulus bill that passes. If hopefully there is a stimulus bill that passes. I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of the political calculations made by congressional Democrats, in particular, Democratic leadership. Nancy Pelosi seemed to be playing hardball prior to the election when Donald Trump was urging Republican lawmakers to sign on to a $1.8 trillion stimulus bill. And I was willing to give Pelosi the benefit of the doubt. She said that the liability shield was a non-starter. She would not sign on to that. And demanded more, demanded better. And at that point, Trump, of course, had some incentive to pass a relief bill because it could have helped him with his election. Now it appears that she's very much willing to sign on to legislation, a stimulus bill that's far weaker. And I'm specifically talking about what the bipartisan senators had proposed last week. It is a watered down bill. It does not provide one-time direct checks to Americans. It does have a liability shield in there for corporations. She said that, congressional lawmakers should support that. What's your response to that argument?
I disagree. As I indicated earlier, we have gone from over 2 trillion down to 350 billion in new money, not a nickel for direct payments at a time when so many of the people, working families in this country, are really suffering. So I think what the Democrats have got to do is draw a line in the sand and stand up and fight back and say, we have already made major concessions, but enough is enough. Working people in this country are going to get that $1,200 check they desperately need and the $500 for the kids.
I'm trying to understand sort of the stakes for this bill, what ends up being in it, because it's been many months since the last bill, since the CARES Act. Is it your assumption, is it fair to say that regardless of what ends up getting passed, that will be pretty much it, that's going to be what the federal government?
No, I don't think so. I think, obviously it depends on what happens, with the pandemic, and hope to God the vaccine is distributed as quickly as possible and it is effective, and hopefully that the economy rebounds and people go back to work and have the incomes that they need. But if that does not happen fast enough, it is our obligation to make sure that we do everything we can to protect the workers and their kids in this country. And I think, Biden probably feels the same way. But here's another point that I want to make, which has not been discussed enough. If the Democrats cave on this issue, essentially what you are conceding to McConnell and the Republicans is that we're going to go along with austerity economics. That we have accepted the argument that after huge amounts of money for the military and corporate welfare and Wall Street and everybody else, that right now we got to go into austerity. You know what that means? That means nothing. That we're not going to do anything significant in climate change, in infrastructure, in childcare, in expanding healthcare. We're not going to do anything significant in terms of pushing forward the agenda, the halfway decent agenda that Biden, has supported. So this moment right now is not only how we deal with the crisis today, it is how we look to the future and whether we're going to fight to protect working families or whether we go into an austerity moment.
I love that you mentioned that, because after 4 years of Donald Trump, his tax cuts for the wealthy, his tax cuts for corporations, we're suddenly hearing Republicans ring the alarm regarding deficit spending. It doesn't really seem like they care too much about deficit spending when it comes to tax cuts and handouts, in corporate welfare. And so that kind of lingo, unfortunately, seems to be somewhat persuasive among a portion of American voters. What can Democrats do to maybe improve their messaging on how that talking point is complete and utter nonsense meant to engage in austerity politics?
First of all, when we invest, with terms of climate change, there is no option. You're going to spend a lot more money repairing the incredible damage done to this country by climate change than getting the world to go forward and transforming our energy system. So I'd rather put money into wind, solar, energy efficiency, new transportation, new agriculture, rather than having to rebuild communities destroyed by terrible destructive actions. Second of all, when we rebuild our infrastructure and create millions of jobs, at the end of the day, the economy is going to grow, the tax base is going to grow. So investing in education, in infrastructure, in climate change, in healthcare, keeping people healthy rather than forcing them to go to the emergency room actually saves us money.
You know, I wanted to ask you, Senator, about a point that was raised yesterday on Twitter by Representative Pramila Jayapal, who took issue with the terminology of stimulus checks, sort of pointing out that for most people, this is not about stimulating after a bad Q1 and we want to, make the economy a little bit stronger. This is about survival. This is about not being thrown out of your apartment. Is this a possible area where the language that's being used on this really important area is sort of playing into the way Republicans seem to think about and talk about this bill rather than the Democrats who seem to understand that lives are actually on the line?
Well, I think, Pramila is, of course, absolutely right. It really is quite amazing to me the degree to which my Republican colleagues are very worried about corporations getting protection for irresponsible behavior in terms of the coronavirus and getting their workers sick. They're very worried about that. But when children in America go hungry, when working people are going to get evicted from their apartments, when people have no health insurance, it is incredible how there is a blind eye to that suffering. And we've got to get people to stand up. I mean, this is one of the things we're working on right now, why I'm on this show right now. Hey, folks out there, if you think it is important that the government does the right thing for working people, get on the phone, call up your representative, call up your senator, and tell them that if we could bail out Wall Street, we give corporate welfare to the fossil fuel industry, we could protect the working families of this country in this terrible moment.
Senator Sanders, calling your lawmakers, demanding change, demanding action, unfortunately hasn't yielded the results that Americans have been hoping for, the results that Americans need. And so there have been a lot of conversations among the left regarding what can be done to win on these issues. And one of the things that I've noticed is that even in red states like Alabama, you have Amazon workers who are working to unionize. In other debates among leftist circles, you're hearing arguments about how we need to really organize and approach this with a possible general strike. I wanted to get your thoughts on those actions. Do you think that that's a good strategy to move forward and demand change among congressional lawmakers?
Well, I think we need to mobilize the grassroots of this country and working people in general. What you didn't mention, Anna, is that in Florida, a state where Trump won by, I think, 3 points, the minimum wage passed by, I think it was 10 points. The agenda that we are fighting for, healthcare for all is a human right through Medicare for all, creating millions of jobs through a Green New Deal, rebuilding our infrastructure, canceling student debt. Do you know what? Those are popular ideas. And we've got to get candidates out there who are prepared to stand up and fight for those ideas, and grassroots organizations to organize people to support those candidates.
Not just about maybe a week ago, Representative Pelosi was quoted something to the effect of saying that the bill doesn't necessarily need to be as strong as we had been pushing for in the past, the Democratic Party, because we have a game changer, which is a president who is coming in who's going to respect the science. That seemed to me to indicate a disconnect with how the pandemic is still on a day-to-day basis affecting regular people, and how a president in 58 days is great, but we're about to enter a period of 3,000 plus deaths a day. Is that just a misstep, or like when you talk to senators and representatives, do they get how bad it is out there when it comes to the day-to-day effect of the pandemic?
Some do, and some don't. I mean, it saddens me immensely, and it talks about the corruption of the political system, that representatives from the poorest states in this country, the poorest states, are often the most reactionary. And why that's so is subject for another discussion. But clearly, we have got to mobilize all over this country at the grassroots level on the issues that the American people care deeply about. We are winning the ideological debate. The people understand healthcare is a human right. They got to have a minimum wage, which is a living wage, at least $15 an hour. That climate change is real. We've got to address it, et cetera, et cetera. And now we need to mobilize people in support of candidates who are prepared to fight and implement those ideas.
Senator Sanders, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us about the stimulus bill, and thank you for continuing to fight on behalf of the best interests of Americans.
Thank you very much, Anna. John, thank you.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.